Oh, hello! Hello, YouTube land. I am here with all of my students from the Tom Salta Masterclass series, and this is going to be like an open forum Q&A session. So, just wanted to say hello to everybody. How you all doing? Yay! Cheer if you're feeling good. Yay! Okay, great. Hopefully you came loaded with some questions. So, as I was saying to the students again, it's really great to kind of take a course and all, but the thing is, with video courses, you don't have that element of interactiveness with the students. At least when you go to a convention, you can go up and ask a question later, or you can have a conversation in the hallway. So really, that's what this is meant to be. It's meant to be a forum so I can interact with all of my students. If they have any questions, they're going to be beneficial for everybody. And I also have a chat open on YouTube as well. I will try to get to questions there, but of course I'm going to be prioritizing the questions of the people here in the Zoom session who are the students of the Masterclass series. All right, so are you ready to go? So get ready to raise your virtual hands there, folks. All right. Who's going to be first? Actually, we have a question here from Airly on my screen. Airly Brighton, an amazing singer. You know her from Ori and the Blind Forest, and I've worked with her on a lot of my scores as well. So she's here to join us too. She asks, a common question that is asked of me frequently is how to get noticed by game developers when you are first starting out. I'm a terrible example because I was approached, but aside from attending game conventions, do you have any resource for people to help facilitate marketing and promotion? Okay, that is a great question, and it's also one of those kind of catch-22 situations, right? Because it's like, okay, so I'm just starting out, but how do I get noticed? Like I'm not doing things on a big scale. But here's just a few tips, and it's kind of like one of those snowballs. You start it, and then you start to roll it down the hill, and then it starts to propel itself. But PR is really important. Marketing is very important. Very early in my career, I would always hire a professional PR person who would, when I had something worth talking about, there would be an opportunity for me to do, let's say, an interview or some kind of article or a podcast or something like that. So that was a wonderful thing. Now, social media is a lot more prevalent today than when I started, in games even. So you have that facility to you as well. You can really use the social media. But again, unless you start paying on social media and boosting your posts, but this is really more about how to start meeting people. So look, if I said it once, I said it a million times. It's all about relationships, right? It's all about making friends. So that's one good thing about conferences is, it's an easy way to be hanging out and, you have a drink or whatever and you're walking around and you get in a conversation and, you meet this person maybe year after year and you start to recognize faces. So it's about those kind of relationships. Someone might introduce you. Hey, hey, Airly, I'm working with Brian here. He works for XYZ developer or publisher. I'm working with him on this. And then you're introduced. Oh, yeah, hi. Oh, I heard about you. And it's one of those kind of organic things. Certainly a great way to do it is to make friends and work with colleagues who already established. And don't be shy to ask for an introduction. Never be shy. If Airly were to ask me, hey, Tom, I've always wanted, if you wouldn't mind, if you could maybe make an introduction to XYZ or whatever, of course I would do so. So, again, I think it's really about that. Getting people's attention online is really difficult, and it's hit or miss, mostly miss. I think so. I'd really kind of stress the idea of organic relationships. So besides conferences, besides people you already know, there are definitely a lot of these groups online. You know, there's a lot of game composing groups, and there's a lot of groups around any interest. So I would definitely go there. That would be a great way to start. Hopefully I answered that question. Let me see. Okay, Chris, I believe you have
Hey,
a raised hand.
I do. I got a question. When you're composing orchestral music,
Yes.
I know that budget is going to play a big part of answering this question, but if you had to decide, would you say always use an orchestra unless I, can't, or would you say I want to be more frugal with my money? If I can get away with VSTs, I will. If you had that choice, which would you choose?
Okay. If all was equal, meaning the virtual VSTs and whatever would sound just as good or better than the live orchestra, then the only reason to do live orchestra, in my opinion, if all is equal, is for PR purposes. Quite frankly, a lot of these remote orchestras, or even non-remote orchestras, but will have the ability for you to bring in or hire a camera crew. You know, and it's a really wonderful PR opportunity. You will find that these orchestras are more than happy to help you record them and put it on your channels and promote it. When I did a perfect example of that, I mean, when I was working on Killer Instinct Season 3, when we did a big orchestral session for one of the characters, Mira, we definitely paid a little bit extra and got a good video recording, and then we put it into our behind the scenes videos, Clayton and I. And it's great. It's great entertainment. Now, did it make it sound better? Yes. Yes. Could I have gotten away without the live orchestra? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm not saying it was just a good, camera thing. That's the only reason we did it. No. But quite frankly, it's not typically beneficial to hire an orchestra unless you need that. If it sounds as good and you need those kind of videos. Now I'm all about supporting musicians. Please God, I'm all about supporting musicians. But sometimes the budgets are so tight, and us composer types, we throw our heart and soul into this, and we oftentimes we'll just lose money just because it's awesome. And I get that. I get that. We just want to make it great. But it is a business, folks. So let's show a little responsibility here. I mean, if you're getting established, hey, it's especially good. Just throw it in there, break even, or maybe even lose a little bit, and get as much gravitas as you can. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Absolutely, thank you.
Excellent, excellent, cool, cool. Let's see. All right, do we have a question from Joe? Is this working?
I think it is.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hi,
So
Joe.
I was wondering, at what level, if any level, could an aspiring composer think about specializing in a particular style, and is that ever a good idea to do or no?
Well, that's a great question, and that's something that relates to a very common question a lot of people ask, which is, all right, is it good to be a jack of all trades, or is it good to specialize? Um, you're gonna get typecast, whether you like it or not. You're gonna get typecast, so you have to plan on that. I think it's really good to be skilled at lots of things, but especially when you're starting out, I think it's really important to make it easy for people to hire you. In other words, they have to understand what you're about. Because I will tell you, it has been an albatross in my career for years and years and years. And in fact, maybe it still is. With people that I don't know, with developers and colleagues that I've worked with that maybe don't understand the spectrum of music that I do. I think many times I will lose opportunities because they don't realize that I'm actually as skilled or more skilled in one particular area that they weren't even familiar with. But you have to understand that's just the way it is. It happens in all of entertainment. It happens with actors all the time. Come on, think about actors out there that basically get hired for the same role. You know, I love Samuel Jackson, but I mean, come on. Whether it's Star Wars or Pulp Fiction, he's the same guy. And that's not because he's not a good actor. He's a fantastic actor. I think just Hollywood wants that. You know, and I think the same happens with composers. I think everybody feels more comfortable just hiring you because, oh, well, you've done that already. You're proven. And you just get, you know, no one likes to take risks, especially in these big games because, look, there's a lot of money in it. Right? Come on. If you're the audio director, are you going to really dump $200,000 into someone who's not proven in something? I mean, you can't risk that. So use that to your advantage. Understand the psychology. But over the years, when you get to know, some of your colleagues for years, you know, some of my colleagues now I know for over 15 years in the game business, there are a few people that are like, yeah, I'll hire you because I know you can do this or I know you can do that. It doesn't matter whether it's a silly, you know, pop song sung in Japanese that sounds like it's from a TV show, or whether it's a serious fantasy score, or whether it's a horror score, or whether it's a sci-fi fantasy or a big, you know, military action game. They know that I can do it, but most people in my professional circles don't understand that. So that's probably a long-winded answer, but I hope it covered all the facets of that question. Yeah? Cool. All right, good. Hopefully I'm not missing anybody. Hopefully this raising hand thing is working. Juan, are you next, or was someone there before Juan? Is everything good? Are we good? Thumbs up?
Yeah, Juan was there.
Excellent. Perfect. Juan, you're up.
Okay. In your class, when you use the example of Killer Instinct,
Yes.
and you talk about implementation when you have to match the rhythm of the music with the rhythm of the final move, the super special move,
Yes.
when the game is rhythmic based, for example, there's one called Crypt of the Necrodancer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another popular is one of the drums, the Japanese one with the drums, the arcade.
Yes.
That you have to follow the rhythm. How does that change the process for the composing and the implementation? Because I think that maybe the mechanics have to be programmed and kind of changed based on the music and not the music based on the mechanics, or
That's
it's
right.
always mechanics over music.
That's right. So that's a great question, and there's a myriad of ways that games that depend on music synchronization work. All right, that's I think the general category. So for just to try to shoot through all the broad categories, you got music games, right? Obviously they're like to the rhythm. So in that case, the song comes first, and then the rhythm, the graphics are tempo synced to the music. All right. So that's one way it happens. Another way it might happen is I remember when I was working on From Dust. That was a really unique game. In fact, it's now, I believe you can play it on Xbox. I don't know if it's on Gold or whatever. You can download it, but it's still playable on the new Xbox. That game was really amazingly complex under the hood because it was all rhythm-based, although you don't realize it was rhythm-based. Okay, so you're dealing with all these tribes in this alternate universe kind of thing. So it has this primitive vibe to it, but it's also the sci-fi vibe to it. And there was basically an invisible or a silent click going on throughout the whole game. So there were two main tempos. If things were calm and peaceful, there was one tempo. That tempo was, let's just say, 90 beats per minute. I don't remember if it was. And then there was the exacerbated or the worrisome tempo, the tempo when stuff is happening that's bad. And let's just say that was 100 or 110, right? So first of all, that means that everything that I created had to be within those two tempos. So that was a situation where I'm like, okay, no problem. I just set my metronome. Boom. These are the 90, and I would label everything. Here's the 90 BPM. Okay, these are the 110 BPM, and whatever. Then I would give it to them. They would start exactly on the bar, and then I would give them the files, and then they would sync it to that. In the case of Killer Instinct, which is where you started your question, Killer Instinct was unique. The actual game itself, the fighting mechanism, wasn't synced to the music, right? But that thing you're referring to from the Game Music Essentials course, where I show that super combo thing, the ultra combo, sorry, that was unique. That was synced to the music. More specifically, it was synced to a beep map, which I provided. So the beep map, I would give them a little rhythm of just a little tiny sine wave, like beep, 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 right? I would provide that to them, literally, just that. And I would give that to the animators, and they would take the little beep, 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 and then they do this cool, crazy finishing move that was synced to that little recording of the beat map. Then I would take the beat map at the same time in parallel, and well, actually, no, I didn't sync to it. I would give them little hits, like about 50 different hits, and this is the same stuff that Mick Gordon did, which is why Mick Gordon's hits from previous seasons are compatible with my beep maps and vice versa, because the game itself would individually trigger each of those hits according to the beeps. So they go bong, 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 bong. It's kind of like a little MIDI keyboard in the game. Does that make sense? So there's all kinds of ways to do it. You know, you can put the music first, you can put the game first, the game can trigger the music, or the hits, the music can trigger the... There's all kinds of cool situations. One last situation I'll tell you is that when I was doing Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2, there was one cool scene where they wanted the choir, they wanted me to create this special music, and then it would build and go da, 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 whatever. And they're like, can you give us the music first, because we want to, it's like a sort of like a cutscene, sort of, but it's in-game, sort of like a pre-scripted thing, and they would have it, so right when the choir happens, the tanks would show up. So that was like one thing that was synced to the music, but they handled that. Cool, right? Excellent. All right, good question. Good question. Let's see. All right. Deborah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask if, like, I like to find video game scores and, you know, like crack them open, you know, study them and whatever.
Yep.
And I haven't managed to find any places where I can get video game scores. I did manage to find a Patreon, and there's amazing orchestral score arrangements there. So I wanted to add, but you know, there's not a lot. It's only as much as the orchestrator has done, so it's not like a great variety.
Right.
So I wanted to ask if you knew that is that anything that has orchestral scores or video game scores that we could study.
That's a great question. Okay, I'm not sure if the answer I have is the best answer to your question, but this is what I'm going to say. First of all, I do not know if there's a single resource that kind of like, here, you come here for video game scores. I don't know. What I do know is that Google will find it if you're looking for a particular score. What I do know is that sometimes scores are, you know, fans will recreate certain ones. And also a third option, which you might not have considered, and this might sound crazy, but write the composer and ask them. Ask them, do you happen to have... I've been asked, and depending on the situation, there's no, you know, as long as I have permission from the developer, for the publisher, excuse me, as long as I have permission to share it, there's usually not an issue. You know, now I don't have scores for everything I do, because not everything I do goes into a live orchestral session, right? But things that I have done live orchestral sessions for, I do have the scores for. And if you were to ask me, and I'm probably open enough to it like this, Tom, send me the scores to Ghost Recon. You know, I don't know, but I can certainly ask, and I'd be very happy to share if I'm allowed to and if I could find them. So I'm sorry, but I would say Google, and maybe someone else has a better answer. If you do, on YouTube, please type it in for everybody. Okay, and I will also try to field questions from YouTube, so there is a live chat window. I can't promise I will get to those, but please ask away there as well. And Chris Frost is helping me out with facilitating that. All right, does that hopefully sort of answer some of your questions?
Yeah, it helps. Like, it hadn't occurred to me the idea of writing to the composer and asking. That's good. That's a good idea.
Yeah, why not?
I like that. Thank you.
It doesn't hurt. I mean, it doesn't hurt at all. All right, cool.
Exactly.
Good, excellent. Mike.
Hey Tom, how you doing?
Hey man, how you doing?
Pretty good. A quick question here. Have you ever been in a situation where you kind of had to change course in a soundtrack? Like, maybe you talked with the studio developer and you kind of had an idea of where you wanted to go with it. And it was going fine, you weren't, you were delivering things on time, but maybe they had some sort of internal discussion and, oh, well, we want to change course a little bit. And you kind of had to go backwards a little bit and kind of do what redo some stuff and not start from scratch, but you know what I'm trying to say, just kind of have to make some tweaks, and stylistically they wanted to go in a different direction. So that kind of thing.
This sounds like this question's coming from experience.
Maybe a little bit, but I mean, it happened to me in a game jam, but I just didn't know.
Oh, in a game jam. Okay, well, you mean when you have 24 hours to do a score?
Exactly.
Great. Oh, thanks, folks. You want to change
just
direction?
one piece, but,
talk about the 11th hour. Yes. There has been a change in direction request sometimes. In fact, before I think about some of my own, I'm going to think about one that a wonderful friend and colleague of mine, Gary Scheinman, shared publicly many years ago when he was doing BioShock. One of my favorite pieces of music from BioShock was the opening scene, where it goes underwater and that wonderful virtuoso violin performance. It was so amazing. And, the juxtaposition, it was just artistry, it was brilliance. He was generous enough to share the fact that was not the first approach. The first approach was much more literal of an approach. It was like, okay, intimidating, scary music going down into scary underground dystopian city. And then somewhere along the line, a member of the team came back. I don't remember if it's audio director, but whatever. They kind of had a change direction. And then Gary so artfully recreated that. So it does happen. I wouldn't say it's very common. I'm certainly not a fan of it. But it's to be expected, especially at the beginning of a project. I mean, come on, we're not all perfect. Sometimes we think we have a good idea, and it turns out, you know what? So it happens. It happens. Now you're probably want to know, well, where's the line? Because composers don't get paid like lawyers. We don't get paid by the hour. We get paid by the minute of delivered music. So if we do 5 revisions of a 2-minute track, we're not getting paid for each of those failed revisions. We're getting paid for the final deliverable, right? So at some point it becomes abusive and not really practical. You have to kind of feel it out. I mean, I don't have a magic number, but I can tell you this. If I'm on revision 3 and we're still drastically changing direction and I feel like they're just using me to eliminate ideas, then I'll raise my hand and I'll be like, I think there's some lack of communication happening at this point. So if I'm not hitting your target, either I don't understand you or you're not communicating exactly what you want. And I think most experienced directors will understand that and say, look, yeah, I get it. If this goes past a certain amount, we will pay extra. We'll make it an additional scope. And quite frankly, I've been fortunate enough to not have that become an issue. I mean, I have gotten additional scope because direction has changed so drastically after such a significant amount of work has gone into it and delivered per their liking. In other words, this is exactly what you asked for. Here it is. It's sounds as good or better than the reference idea, and now you decided to do something completely different. But you know, you want to be as generous as you can, and you know, I think it's fine to over deliver and give a pass to a few mistakes and missteps, but not the whole way through. I mean, you don't want to do the score twice or three times, right? So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Awesome. Do we have Chris up next?
Yeah.
Okay, great. You're on.
One of my favourite parts of Game Music Essentials was the creative process, because it covered a lot of things that I would have otherwise not have thought of. So I find myself keep going back to that and watch it again. But my question to you is that if you have, say, I don't know how it works in your field, but if you have 6 months to score a game, do you say to yourself, okay, that first month I'm nailing that theme down, because from that theme I can extrapolate the other things? Do you have a timeline within the deadline that you have where you say, okay, well this month is where I'm getting that done and this is where I'm getting that done?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's a great question, and thanks for asking it. As I talk about in the creative process, the first step for me is always that absorbing step, that non-creation step, that inhale, you know, that the research and development stage. You know, I might want to kind of, you know, get into it and start right away because I'm so excited to work on this new game that I've been dreaming of my whole life, and but I find that when you hold back and you kind of start to, you know, use that early time to ruminate about ideas, to absorb any kind of inspirational material, whether it's from the client or whether it's movies or games that are similar, that might share some things in common. You know, there's an expression that's saying, you know, sometimes it's good to sleep on it. Well, quite literally, science has proven that when you do sleep on certain ideas, you know, when you do allow yourself the freedom to daydream, you know, and go about your life before you start creating, you will get some really good ideas. So that if I have 6 months, I usually like to take, I don't know, I'm just going to say about 10% of the time, believe it or not, to just start brainstorming and just coming up with random cool ideas. And I think it's so important, because those first early ideas are going to be usually the most inspired. You know, it's like when you meet someone new and you fall in love. It's like that kind of like that early, you know, starstruck, starry-eyed, I'm enamored with this. That happens with creative endeavors as well. That early stage where it's like, oh wow. Oh, that's all I can think about. I'm so excited. Oh, wow, this, and you're just full of possibilities and stuff. Use that energy to go out and use it and to create. So, again, I talk about this in the course, but I'll use this, you know, to maybe go through new libraries that I might have just recently purchased, or wow, I've always wanted to take the time and go through Omnisphere, or you know, or gather some sounds, or watch this movie, or listen to this album, or whatever it is. And I invite my clients to share reference material with me as well. I'm like, you know, hey, what's your dream? If you could dream about what this could possibly sound like out of something that exists in the world or the universe, can you send it my way, you know? And I'll just absorb. And then when I start actually creating, it's like so much more effective. Cool?
Take advantage of the honeymoon phase.
Yes, absolutely. Then we get into exactly the next phase. Great question, Chris. Great question. Let's see. So according to this, let me see if there's any questions, by the way. Manuel, you have your hand up? Oh, no, Joe. Joe has a hand up. Let me just see if there's any questions online. Oh, thank you for the Ghost Recon comment. I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's see. Hopefully I'm not missing any questions that are up higher up the list. Okay, so Joe, you're up.
Hey.
Hey again.
So, I'm wondering, why is it uncommon to see games that allow the gamer to choose between different adaptive soundtracks? For instance, you could have a thrash metal battle sequence of loops, and for the same battle, if the player so chose, you could have a cyberpunk sequence of loops that could be selected. I feel like that's kind of common in racing games. You would have a jukebox or a track radio approach like Grand Theft Auto or Cyberpunk 2077. But when you're in that game mode, it's not really intended to be interactive. You would just kind of cycle through a radio station.
That's right.
So why is that?
Well, that's a great question. Now, I know that you come from the world of film music, right?
Kind of.
Kind of. All right. So the thing is this. Imagine there's a big difference between listening to the radio in a car while you're driving around, and you can go through the list of games, whether it's like some games it's actually diegetic music, like I remember like Crackdown back in the day, or it was literally like in the car on the radio. You got in the car, or GTA or stuff like that. A lot of that is interchangeable. I mean, you're driving, it's driving music. Doesn't matter what song it is, as long as it's high energy and it sets the mood that you want. Sometimes it's not. I think in GTA maybe you could set different stations. It doesn't even matter, But we're talking about score, right? The other issue is score. So imagine taking a scene like, I don't know, wherever my brain goes, Braveheart. I'm just trying to think of, movies. The first thing that jumps in my head, Braveheart. And you have that scene where there's that really important battle and it goes into slow motion. And instead of that heartfelt, or Gladiator, instead of that gut-wrenching, sad music, you put some cyberpunk music behind it, or you put some, medieval, action music behind it. That's going to change the tone. That's going to change the entire emotion that the director wants you to feel. Right? So that's why I would not be a big fan, nor do I think most any audio director, of a game where you're trying to create a set experience of emotion. You want a player to feel a certain way and make the music interchangeable outside of a sports game or a driving game or anything where the music is just background bed, right? And it's built into the game. So that would be my answer to that. I think it could negatively affect the experience of the game. Does that make sense?
Totally. Thanks so much.
Great. Cool. All right, great. Let's see. We have Greg. You're up.
Yeah. Hey, thanks.
Hey,
you can hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Okay. This is kind of more just about a question about how you switched over from like being a producer. Like, can you describe what it was like to be like a music producer, like you were like in the 90s, right?
Yes.
And you switched to game audio. Did you do a lot of research, or did you just get writing? Like, I'm going to make this album, be Atlas plug, and like, could you describe that a little bit, please?
In a word, I would say it was gut-wrenching. It was horrifying. Well, that's two words. Yeah, so the process of starting over, and by the way, there's a really good answer to this that's 17 minutes long. If you Google my name and TEDx, I gave a TEDx talk a little bit back, and I kind of talked through this whole mindset of the whole process. But let me see if I can give you the elevator version of that. Transitioning from making records into making music to picture to games was a very, very, very different mindset and a whole different skill set and a whole different set of connections. So it was basically starting over with the exception of a lot of the technical production skills I knew could be applied to the same thing. So the good news is that when I transitioned from making records doing that world for 15 years into games, I already knew A to Z about production, which is why I came up with the crazy idea to become a recording artist and approach it through the licensing door. Because when I first tried to get into the industry, naively assuming that when I walk into E3 with 100 CDs, that, people would be just welcome me with open arms, with, "Oh, Tom, so wonderful. You want to get into games? Great. Oh, you worked on the Share record. That's fantastic. You'd be perfect to score this horror game." It doesn't work that way. They didn't care about that. So that's why I came with the idea is that maybe it's better that I don't try to be a composer out of the gate with no credits. I approach it as an established artist or a new hot artist and make music that would be perfect for licensing. So back in 2002, when I started this process, that was the best idea I could come up with, and I'm happy to say it worked. I think it still is a interesting approach. There was no guarantee, and there was no predefined path, or that this would work. There was no precedent I knew of. So it was like one of those things. Like, thank God it worked, and that's why I called the album, by the way, 2 Days or Die, because I wanted to memorialize this mindset of if this doesn't work, I'm screwed.
So you got to like the game conferences, got to know people, you got to find out more about game audio that through just working it,
right?
And developing for that album, or did you just really just kind of
So basically the actual transition happened like this. When I got the album under process, my publisher, who I teamed up with, he was the one who had the connections to license music. So then I started getting queries from game companies. So Microsoft was the first game company to come by and say, "Hey, we want to license 4 tracks off this new album in Rally Sport Challenge 2, which was amazing, except 3 of the tracks weren't even done yet. I'm like, oh, great, but I got to finish. At the same time, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be a composer in games. So at the same time, I used that as leverage, and I approached some agents. I did some research because, fortunately, the internet was just came into existence pretty much. And I went on this online thing and this thing called Google at the time, which is, again, pretty new. And I started looking up my favorite composers. I started looking up names that I knew. Back in those days, I remember, Bill Brown, who's still an amazing composer. He's still doing it now. Jack Wall, Enon Zor, Jesper Kidd, and at the time, a lot of them had the same agent. So I'm like, oh, I guess I should be contacting this person, So I reached out and I got an agent, and he was, they agreed to sign me up, and then I started getting the chance to pitch on some games, and I started with some small ones, and I got some bigger ones, and it started like that. So
Nice.
That's kind
Great.
of how it worked. And I also joined the Game Audio Network Guild, which I highly recommend. It's a worldwide network of game audio professionals, and it really brought me into the fold of meeting a lot of very interesting people. So that's something I would definitely recommend checking out. So hopefully that answers your question.
That's awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right. Let's see. PUBG theme. Da, 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 da. Thank you very much, Mohammed. I appreciate it. Any other, before I get to the next question? Oh, Greg, you can lower your hand, your virtual hand now. I forgot
We've got
that.
a question from Arely in the chat.
There you go. Let's see. Manuel, do you have a question? No? Okay. Let me see if I can go to the chat here. Trying to budget. Okay. Cool. Here's a question from Arely Brighton. If we are trying to be budget conscious yet still want to elevate our musical projects with a live orchestra, how would we go about shared orchestral session? Is there a central location to coordinate this, or would one need to contact the respective orchestras individually? Great question. So there are a lot of shared sessions out there. I get emailed quite periodically about these shared sessions, and they'll say, hey, Tom, it's either on Facebook or email, and they'll ask me, hey, I just wanted to introduce you to our orchestra. We are doing some shared sessions at the end of the month or whatever, and yada yada. So every time I get one of these, I kind of save that information into my database. So I have a growing database of some of these shared session orchestras. And again, Google is a helpful tool. I don't know how readily available a lot of this information is, but you might be surprised. But again, Airly, you know a lot of people, so I would ask around to your composer friends and say, hey, who would you recommend for some shared sessions? Because they're out there and they depend on it, and I could probably look up a few as well. And we have some answers here. Musiversal has a great package for short orchestral sessions. Cool. All right. See, I'm not familiar with all of those, but if anyone has any other answers, feel free. This is good to put into the comments on YouTube. That'll be cool. All right, great. So any other, let's see. Do we have any other questions from our students? No? Okay, good. I will go to reading some of the chat questions. So let me see. Get this window open. All right. If you have any other questions or requests, just put them in there and I will scan and try to read them. And again, a lot of these questions are coming out of having watched the Game Music Essentials Masterclass, which covers all the things from understanding the basic implementation methods, how music works in a game, the way that I approach scoring, the whole basics of game music in general, the whole mechanism, the way it's implemented, the types of implementation, the creative process, and also a lot of business talk. So if people have also business questions as well, that's usually not talked about as much as a lot of the musical and tech and creative questions. So keep those in mind as well. All right. Let's see. Questions. Deborah.
Oh yeah. So I wanted to ask, when I was reading about Ilan Ishkeri's composition when it comes to Ghost of Tsushima and its main theme.
Yes.
He used the method that reminded me of what you said in one of your talks in Video Game Essentials, of not using the entire box of Crayola.
Yes.
Pick 4 colors and paint with that. So I wanted to ask, like, when it's time for you to choose those Crayolas you're gonna paint with, is it difficult for you to choose those colors? Like, do you have like a low-key existential crisis when you're like, okay, well, what color do I choose first? So, like, how do you go about it?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So Deborah's referring to when in the masterclass, I always talk about at the beginning of the creative process. It's really important to narrow down your choices, to set boundaries, creative boundaries, because you'll get more creative when you have less possibilities. And again, that box of crayons, I just love that analogy because, if I have 4 crayons as opposed to 200 crayons, I'm going to start drawing my happy face or whatever face a lot quicker than if I had the 200, because with the 200, I'm going to be thinking, what shade of blue should I start with? Whereas the other one, I just focus on the main ideas. So how do I narrow it down? Yeah, and that has everything to do with the musical recipe, as I like to call it. And every project is going to have, if I have my way, is going to have its own musical recipe, its own sonic signature. And I think that's really, really, really so important. And it's one of the ways that I bring value to a project. It's always my goal, for anyone who listens to any of my scores. Now, I don't know to what degree I always pull this off 100%, but it is always my goal. If you listen to any of my scores, if you were to just randomly go on Spotify or whatever it is that you listen, that you would know with your eyes closed within 10 seconds of what score you're listening to. How does that happen? Well, it happens in a myriad of ways, but again, I think it's mostly that sonic signature, that aural landscape. There's a very, very different sonic signature in Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands as there is in Halo's Spartan Assault, as there is in Red Steel, as there is in Hawks or Ghost Recon. And you know, and I'm working out some other games that I can't quite announce quite yet. They're coming out later in the year. I wish I could, but that is a process of taking ideas from the game. So let's say whether it's a time frame, like does the game take place in a certain time frame? I remember like in Wolfenstein Youngblood, it was 1980s, and it had to. So we decided that the sonic signature for that score would be very early 80s Cocteau Twins, dirty, rusty, noisy 80s post-punk music. You know, so I was kind of like limited myself to the technology in those days. And, you know, I'm a synth geek, so I loved going through either real synths that I had or designing or finding and farming out sounds that would fit within that score. Also, I mean, down to the effects themselves, the reverbs that were used, the echoes that were used. You know, when it comes to orchestral, you know, that's a little bit different, right? Because the orchestra has much more of a timeless, universal palette. But it becomes a little bit easier in hybrid scoring because I have the ability to get more specific. I mean, in the case of Halo, right, the sound that Marty and Michael established so iconically back in 2001. I've said this before. You know, in my perspective, the sound of that was a combination of things. It had a bit of Celticness in it, certainly. It had a bit of sacredness into it, like sacred choral music. It had a bit of rock, or maybe certain 80s-ish rock at some, maybe, I don't know. It had tribalness to it. You know, and a variety of other things. It also had some harmonic sensibilities, the way that Marty and Michael would kind of voice and frame a lot of their chords, a lot of the suspensions, a lot of the styles of voice leading. You know, all these become part of a sound. And just like a really good actor, I think it's wonderful to really, you know, whether you're creating a new character or whether you're becoming an existing character, that's the way music is. You know, and to nail it down and to set those boundaries on that character. That's the way I like to see myself as a composer. So I can be transformed into that character, into that musical character. Does that answer the question? Hopefully.
Sounds great.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. All right, cool. Let me see. We're running out of time here. I have a question from Late Night Gaming. Hey, what's up? Okay, I see 2 questions on screen, so I'm going to take your most recent one. I hope that's okay. How do you overcome the initial hurdle of having a blank project and finding a melody? Haha, the dreaded blank slate. I find it sometimes crippling when starting from scratch, and my mind locks up. You're not alone. Everybody. I think everybody. I remember... I don't know where. I remember Hans Zimmer talking about this quite openly as well in some video. And he was talking about, you know, that's the hardest part is finding those few notes. You know, just those few notes, whatever. And I think that's just, that's where it kind of tests our mettle, so to speak. That's where it takes an element of faith and patience, I believe, when you are looking at a blank slate. And this is one key reason why I don't like having the pressure of jumping right into scoring on day one. Because if you feel that, okay, I have to now do score for, you know, game XYZ, do you really think your best stuff is going to come out if you just have to start delivering music the next day? That's ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure there's many prodigies out there who do this famously well, and that's wonderful. Great. I'm not that person. I need to kind of simmer on that. And, you know, I think when the pressure is off, some of my best ideas come out. But the pressure's always on, technically, right? If I'm being hired, you have to work under pressure. So I think mentally it's okay to give myself permission to not be under pressure. Say, you know what, I'm taking a creative sandbox vacation for a week. All right, I'm just going to go into my creative cave and go in my studio, and I'm not going to worry about anybody's comments, or if an idea comes to me today or it comes to me tomorrow. It's going to come. You just got to keep showing up. You know, and that's why it's so important. And again, if you haven't watched it in the Game Music Essentials, please watch it. Watch the Creative Process Talk, because it really shows examples of this. And I think the first step is the most important. The most important step is the not composing part. Believe it or not. I know it's very counterintuitive, but it's true. So take advantage of that early time and let just ideas come to you and flow, and just get excited and inspired. I think the only time that you get blocked is when you're scared. All right? And you have to kind of just use mind control to not be that way. You know, easier said than done. Trust me, I get it. I remember when I was hired for my first Halo score, Spartan Assault. I was like, oh, I always dreamed about doing Halo. I just got hired. Oh my God. You know, I was like, you know, so I get it. I get it. But anyway, so we are out of time. I'm going to take one more question from our group here, and then we're going to do this every month on Wednesday, middle of the month. So I invite you all to come and join us and share with your friends, but join us every month to do this. And if you're interested, please check out the Masterclass. I have the URL here. And join the family. It'll be great. So, Manuel, did you have a question? Or no? Because you're first in line.
No, I think it's just my background.
Oh, it's your back. Okay,
confusing.
No problem. Great. All right. Well, then I'm going to jump to the most recent question I see online, and then we're going to wrap it up. Roswell, actually really interested in recommendations of what audio and music programs to start. As someone trying to get into maybe making music, this will be most interesting. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, when we talk about music programs, that's a whole nother conversation. But instead of kind of going through, which I don't have the time to go through the pros and cons of every single music creation program out there, let's start with the way that is most intuitive for you. If I were to kind of take it down to a broad category, you have your DAWs, your digital audio workstations. So if you're on Mac, a free one is GarageBand. The pro version is Logic Pro. Then you have, you have Cubase, you have Nuendo, that's cross-platform. You have, Pro Tools. And there's some other new ones coming out as well. You have Luna on the Universal Audio program. There's other ones. There's plenty out there. But if you're more of a person who likes to construct music out of pre-existing parts, more like a remixer or a DJ would do, when Live first came out, I mean, that's what it was designed for. There were cells, and you kind of drag things into Live. Logic does this now. It actually has got a cool new system where you can drag, loops and things into cells and what have you. I can only speak from experience with those two methods of making music. I mean, there's so many interesting programs, but I find as a composer, the thing that really gives me the most power and flexibility and the shortest distance between a concept to the finished product is using something like a regular DAW like Logic Pro. It doesn't hurt that I've been using it since 1989 on a ancient Atari ST computer. But I think, as they say, the best program to use is the one you're most familiar with. And if you're not familiar with any of them, well, time to start peeking around and doing some research. Go out there, explore YouTube, talk to friends, talk to colleagues, enjoy the adventure. There'll be stuff out there that you can check out. All right, so I'd love to keep going, but we are out of time. So again, I invite you to come back with us next month. And also, if you want to join the family, please go to TomSalterMasterclass.com. In the meantime, I will see you all next month. All right? So take care, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, you
Bye-bye.
got it. Bye-bye.